Everyone, it is Sunday and I am out here with my little, he's playing Minecraft. I am painting. There's one baby in the oven, I'm not sure which one it is, but I will show you the babies that I'm working on right now. This is Daphne. She has all her reds and yellows and shading and all that stuff, and I think in this light she looks pretty pale. Let me see. Yeah, she looks pretty pale in this light, but she really isn't. I am going to give her another wash of flesh. Her lips are pretty red. And here's my little elfie guy. He's got a long way to go, but he's looking cute. This is a baby you wouldn't even need to paint. He's just already so cute. Green. I think I'm just going to do a couple flesh layers and see how he looks and just play with some details. And I just got this guy out of the oven, and this is Harper. He has some pretty strong modeling, and I was toying with the idea of whether or not to give him some richer brown tones or to leave him kind of a pale baby, and I'm going to go with some brown tones. That's what I'm going to do right now, actually. This is Owen Awake. She's very pale, still very ghosty. I think I might leave her super pale, not this pale, obviously, and she's needs to go into the oven. She has a wash on, but he just got a very brown wash, and so he looks dusty and gray and dry, but that's because his paint is drying. This is not how he'll look when he comes out of the oven. And he hasn't had any other washes besides a couple brown ones after I did all the regular stuff. So I'm gonna have to probably give him 2 more brown washes, probably mostly shading, do his lips, because I just barely started on his lips, and do his details. Miss Joanna. She's turning out great. A little bit darker than I intended, but I kind of like it. I don't think I'm going to go any darker than this. I might give her some shading and some shadowing, but that's about it. Might do some powder at the end. I'm not sure. I won't be rooting her. I'm just going to be painting her hair. This is what happens to the vinyl when you sand it down. It gets scratchy, and then the paint sits inside those scratches, and it's hard to get it off. I might just put a little more brown around there. And she's also just got a layer on, so she probably looks a little funny, but the weird thing about putting babies into bake is you're not sure what you're going to get when they come out. You know, sometimes vinyl will like really absorb the paint, and when it does that, it's strongest with blues, sometimes deep reds, a little bit of brown just because brown has red and blue in it. And sometimes the paint gets richer in color. Sometimes it just, from layering color on top of color on top of color and baking every single time, they start becoming richer. The tones become richer. And sometimes colors fade out. We don't know why, but every once in a while you'll see on like a reborn forum people going, oh, what is up with this sculpt? It's not holding paint. I've, done 25 layers on this baby and it still looks like it never had paint on it. I've only experienced that maybe once, but I know some people who paint more frequently, obviously, than me, who have experienced it, and it drives them crazy. And I should be wearing gloves, and I have them over here. I just get up and down so much, and I'm making lunch and doing this and doing that. I just keep forgetting to put them back on. This stuff is not good for your body. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and put a little brown on Mr. Harper's head. This is just some browns that just showed up. And put them all together in a little jar. It is a cloudy day today where I am. I mean, it's not terrible. It's not cold or anything. The sun came out for a little while. My sons and I went to a place where they sell ceramic supplies. It's about less than an hour from where I am. And it's a city that has a lot of, like industrial buildings. It's notoriously not a very wealthy community. It's surrounded by them, but it's, just kind of dumpy and doesn't have a super safe history. Has a lot of crime. To go get our stuff, so we decided to make a day out of it. It's a huge warehouse, and they have all the doors rolled up, and they have fans going, and they're just really trying to do their part, to be safe and let people feel confident shopping. When I do go out and I do run errands, I just try to make a list to get in and out as fast as I can. I don't need to be hanging out, chatting up people, doing window shopping. So we had a list of things that we needed to get. We're doing some ceramic work. We're making a bunch of cups and plates and just stuff for fun. I may stick it up on Etsy. I'm going to do some tree bells too. I'm making a couple for my house. I don't want to scare away birds. They're important, but I don't want them nesting in the trees right around the house. A lot of people put owls up and some people put bells. We're just trying to stay busy and do creative projects. But it was so surreal getting out and driving that far. And I don't know. I was sad there were so many more tent cities out there than I am used to seeing. And there always have been. There's a big homeless population out there. It just seemed more so than I'm used to. And maybe it's just that I haven't been out there in a while. But my youngest son is kind of old enough to understand what that means. And so it was like a teaching moment. We talked a little bit about why that might be, why people might not have a home to live in. And some people, it's a choice. And some people, it's just bad luck. Just talking about that. My father, I'll tell a little story about him. My father went to Vietnam when he was 17. It's because I was on the way. And he wanted to provide for my mom and me. And that was really the option that was open to him. And during that time, it was a good chance that he would have been drafted anyway. I heard talk that because he was my grandmother's only son, that he might not have had to go, but I don't know for certain how that worked at that time. So he figured he'd have to go anyway. Baby was on the way, might as well go. And his mother signed off for him to go. He did his tours, and we got to live in different places. When I was little, we lived in Honolulu, and we lived in Kansas for a little while. But I do remember our time in Hawaii. A lot of my first memories are from there. And it still feels like a place very familiar to me. I do have family that lives there. Anytime I go, I just feel, I know it sounds silly, but it just feels like home. It's an odd thing. I mean, who wouldn't feel that way? Hawaii is beautiful, but I don't know, there's just something about it. Anyway, I digress. So my dad went to Vietnam, and he came back like most people came back from that war with a lot of damage. Health-wise, I'm not sure what the real story is, but they didn't send him on another tour. He came back and did R&R in Hawaii or Honolulu with my mom for a little while, and he thought he was going to go back, and they ended up not sending him back. So he had some kind of heart issue that was causing him some problem. They thought first, maybe it was just anxiety because, the types of things he had to do as being in the infantry, that could be stressful. But I guess they hooked him up to some machinery and said, nope, this is something, it's a heart problem you have, and so we're not going to send you back out. And he ended up getting an early discharge. And the story the VA gave him was that it was something he always had. But the story of my family was, if he'd always had it, why didn't they catch it before they sent him out? That would have been a reason not to send him. People got out of it for less things. So nobody knows. My dad thinks he got something when he was in the jungle, because he came back with a lot of weird parasitic things. Someone like my dad was young and not very well educated, didn't understand why he was going there. When he got there, he was given training And he was told these people are, you know, basically horrible people and they deserve what they get. And if you don't kill them, they'll kill you and, you know, shoot or be shot. And little by little, as he was there and he started understanding things more, he realized he was in the wrong place doing the wrong thing. By then it was just too late. He had a lot of regret about being there. And when he came back, you know, the reception wasn't great. Not that he expected it to be. He just thought it was weird. He didn't understand it, you know. They wanted me to go, they told me to go, and now that I'm back, everybody's mad at me. So he picked up a few bad habits there. Among them was an addiction to opium. And according to him, drugs were part of military culture at that time where he was. Nobody said, you're in trouble if you do that. You know, you just did what you had to do to stay awake or go to sleep. And if you needed something, you asked for it and it was given to you. That's the story I got. If you ask him about things straight out, he would just give you the answer whether you liked it or not, or could handle it or not. He just didn't hide stuff. And, you know, he wasn't always super open about his time there. But he'd get into a mood once in a while and he'd, you know, get to drinking or something, and he'd, you know, tell me these stories I didn't really want to hear. It was more than I think my little mind could handle. But after being in the jungle for so long, some kind of switch. I don't know. We don't know. I mean, had he been not right before he went? We can't know. He was 17. Even if he had like some kind of mental illness, would anybody have known? He was still so young. And according to my mom, he seemed perfectly normal to her, but she's not exactly a perfectly normal person herself, so we just can't know what the real answer is. But we do know that when he came back, he was affected. He went through the same types of things you hear most people coming back from an experience like that. You know, he didn't always stay in the same house that we lived in for very long, but when he was there for a couple of days in a row, there were nights where he'd just get up and start running through the house or wander around or be really scared. And I didn't understand that as a kid. That was just kind of part of my normal. Give you a good look. I'm not sure if you can see me painting. It's one of those things where I can see kind of where it's going, so it makes me feel happy. I'm not going to make him super dark, so I'm probably going to go maybe one more after I bake, see how it goes. So when my dad came back, he just wasn't one of those guys who could sit still and stay put. You know, he had 2 kids he didn't really know. He had a wife that, you know, he grew up with and he loved, but he just wasn't in a place to be mow the lawn dad and take out the trash dad and go home and bring a paycheck in dad. He could barely hold himself together. So he'd be around for a while, and then my mom would be in a really great place for a while. And then he'd borrow the car, and we wouldn't see him again for 3 months. After a few of those times, nobody let him drive their car, including my mom. Or if she needed him to run an errand, she'd say, take a hostage, meaning take a kid so I know you're going to bring my car back. And he wasn't a bad guy, just kind of damaged. Very smart, very interesting man. Very curious, and introduced me to some great music and showed me how to cook and camp and little things, you know. He was big into like survival stuff. He really loved that. And that's how he lived his life after he came back, mostly. He would just go out and get lost. We wouldn't see him for a while. You know, it's not like he went out and had another family or he had another woman or anything. My mom always knew where to find him, but after a while, she just learned to let him be. And he would just wander. He'd just walk for days. He'd find a place to hang out. He was homeless by choice. I do also know that there are people, like my dad and a lot of his friends, his VA friends, choose to be off-grid. They don't want to have an address. They don't want to have a bank account. They don't want to have any of that. which is hard because in order for you to get money from the VA, you have to have an address. And my dad just didn't get his money. He just said, no, I'd rather not have it. So he gave up, you know, his money for a long, long, long time. He didn't start collecting his money until the end of his life. He wasn't like, you know, tinfoil wearing, screaming at stoplights guy. He had friends who lived in like shared housing, VA housing, and they'd invite him over to stay for a while and barbecue and hang out. And yeah, that's just the way he was. I know that people who aren't used to seeing a homeless population sometimes are a little fearful. And, you know, sometimes you should be. There are lots of people with severe mental illness who might not be the safest people to hang out with. But for the most part, you know, I don't ever get stressed out about any of that stuff myself. I just know that, you know, you are not where you live. You know, I am not my car. I am not my house. I am not the things I own. I am the things I do and the people I love and the people who love me and the dreams I have, I think. Does that sound sappy? I don't mean to sound sappy. I just have to say, look at that. Oh, it's so pretty. I'm not going to do more than one more of this brown layer. I know that there's some blue in this brown, and if you've ever done brown skin tones, you get to this point where things are really dirty. Joanne's really dirty right now, and it's because of the blue. That's my opinion. I might not be right, but I feel like blue is the culprit. My goodness, I digress so much. We ended up going to the city to get our clay supplies, and we drove by a lot of homeless encampments. And what happens where I live is there'll be like a vacant lot or an empty parking lot, or even the area like the underpass where a freeway is, that kind of thing. And one or two people will show up with their stuff, and then a couple more people will come. So they let them stay there for a while. When things get unruly and trouble shows up and police have to be called or someone dies, they shoo them out, and then they just find a new spot. And we happened to be stuck in traffic near an area where there was one that you can tell had been there for a long time. Lots of tents. This was really cool, and it was making me think about my dad. A couple of people had kind of like created a little homestead for themselves. Now with COVID, nobody's really shooing people out as much, in my opinion. They might be, but from what I'm seeing, it doesn't look like it. And so people are sitting in their spot for a while, and luckily, this city that we were in was doing the right thing. Well, something that looks like the right thing. Is better than nothing, let's put it that way. They had put up porta potties, and they had put up hand washing stations so you could brush your teeth and wash your face and hands and that kind of stuff. And if you've ever lived anywhere where there's a big homeless population, you know that using the bathroom is a biological must. And it's not like it's a choice. You gotta go, and if nobody will let you into their restaurant, or you know the libraries are closed because of COVID, or things close at night and you have to use the restroom, well, my goodness, what can you do? And so there's, you know, open defecation, and that can make people sick. I mean, there's a million things that need to be done better, and I'm simplifying a lot, but I was happy to see at least they had done that for these people in this camp. And the really cool thing was a couple of people had these flimsy solar panels. I've never seen solar panels like that before. I don't know how many watts those things put out, but you know, quite a few people had 3 or 4 of them sitting out in the sun, which was really cool. And some people had created like little garden beds next to their tent, really small, like the size of this table. My dad would have loved that. My dad was a guerrilla gardener. That wherever he went, he planted stuff in weird places. Oops. I grew up always near, because the housing was inexpensive and my parents didn't have money, I grew up always near an airport or railroad tracks where the rent is the cheapest. And my dad would always go out to the fence behind the railroad tracks, and he'd always make gardens out there. And I used to think it was just because that was the only bit of land he could plant something if we were like living in an apartment or something. But as I grew up, I realized that he was just making sure that anybody who needed food could have easy access to it. A lot of homeless people live near railroad tracks because no one will bother them and nobody really cares. You go off and do it again somewhere else. And as a kid, I thought everybody did that. Of course you grow food for other people, right? My siblings and I kind of raised ourselves for the most part, and we had extended family that loved us and helped out. One thing they would never do is take us away from our parents. My grandmother was very traditional and in denial for the most part that there was something wrong with what was going on. She just called my parents dingalings, and she just kind of always, I think most people would call her an enabler, but she just wanted to keep our family intact. Even if it was messy and it was all kinds of bad things, she just thought it would be much worse if it was not intact. And so she did everything she could to try to maintain that. We got lucky. I don't think we inherited, the genetics that caused them to go wrong. I think I'm gonna throw some babies in the oven. I'll be right back.